This is the story of my sailboat Ascari. It's what I know about her past and how I acquired her, the wonderful people who helped me bring her back to life, and what I'm doing right now with her. I hope you enjoy the story. Ascari is a 40-foot sea runner trimaran. She was designed by Jim Brown. She was built in Wasilla, Alaska, and launched in 1982. I don't know who built her, but according to our U.S. Coast Guard documentation, she was first registered as a commercial fishing vessel. In 1992, she went through the Panama Canal, and at some time she was registered in Miami, Florida. When I first met her, she was in St. Croix in Salt River Marina. She was owned by a guy named Doug Brooks. She was a very pretty trimaran, painted light blue with turquoise canvas. When I was in my early 30s, I was living in St. Croix aboard my little purple monohull, Melody Ann. I was a self-employed canvas worker with my workshop aboard. I made a spray dodger for Ascari, and Doug invited me to go on a lovely day sail with him. I remember being impressed by the amount of deck space and the stability under sail. It seemed it had so much deck space you could play volleyball over the boom. The years passed, and Ascari was sold to Ralph Davis, who had circumnavigated twice aboard his trimaran, Windchime. Unfortunately, Windchime hit a reef in St. Croix and was destroyed. Ralph salvaged what he could, and he bought Ascari, moved aboard, and loved her for a while. But he didn't keep her long. I guess his health was failing, and he ended up selling her to his friend Tom Logsdon. Tom gave her engine an overhaul and started doing some deck repairs and painting and stuff. But his friend Ralph died and willed Tom his house. So what I think happened was Tom's energy and attention moved from Ascari to the house, and Ascari was left sitting on her mooring in Salt River every year getting a little more lonely. One day at a memorial service for a friend, Tom approached me and asked me if I had a boat. I'd been living on land for a little over a year after returning from a 13-year extravagant adventure across the Pacific Ocean to Southeast Asia. I had been sailing on a fast and sexy Newark trimaran named Naga with Captain Jack Pettit. I had returned to the Virgin Islands and resumed my business as a canvas worker, but at the time I had met Tom, I had no boat. I did, however, acquire a real lust for trimarans after sailing on Naga. Tom offered to sell me Ascari, so I went to have a look at her. She was badly neglected and looking pretty close to a wreck at the time, but she was a trimaran. The price was okay for the condition she was in, and I knew if I worked hard at it, I could bring her back to life and seaworthiness. And I really wanted a trimaran. Roger Hatfield, who builds boats on St. Croix at Gold Coast Yachts, had once built a 37-foot sea runner. So he came aboard Ascari with me, and he gave her an unofficial survey. He told me basically what was wrong with her and what would need to be fixed. He also told me the good things about her and said I would do well to have such a boat. Next, I had an engineer-mechanic friend take a look at the old Yanmar engine and give me his opinions on that. The engine was old and rusty, but it ran. It would need constant maintenance, but it ran. Yes, it would need lots of attention, but hey, it would start right up, and it wasn't overheating or leaking or making weird noises, and it ran. And then I spent the night aboard, trying to see if she would talk to me. The bow nets were like built-in hammocks, loose and comfortable to lay in, and her bunks were filled with stuff, but I could see there would be space for sleeping. The center cockpit seemed far from the edges of the boat, and it seemed a very safe place to control things when underway. And the aft cabin was really spacious. Right away, I could imagine how perfectly to set it up to use as my workshop. And she did speak to me. The wind rattled in the halyards gently against the mast, and the waves slapped at the wood hulls like hands softly tapping a drum. That night, beneath the starry sky, her paint peeling and colors fading, she asked me to save her. She asked me to love her. And so, in November of 2014, I bought Ascari, and together we began our adventures. The first thing I did was scrape what I think was about 10 years of barnacles and sponges off her bottom. It took several tanks of air and some help from friends, and except for a 1-inch crab trying to nest in my ear, that job went pretty well. The sails and running rigging were my next challenge. Ralph Davis had brought all his sails from Windchime aboard, so first I had to figure out which ones fit the boat. I repaired all of them, then decided which ones to keep and which ones to get rid of, and I rigged her so I could sail her from Salt River to Christiansted Harbor. I didn't trust that old diesel engine, so with a large inflatable as a tug and tender, I managed to sail her out of Salt River and a short way down the coast of St. Croix to Christiansted Harbor. And I tied her up to a dock in front of the cubicle apartment I was calling home. Miraculously, really miraculously, the mast didn't fall down on the way. One day, about a dozen friends showed up with cold drinks and food, and they helped me clean and organize Ascari. Soon I was able to move aboard and move my canvas shop out of the space I rented on the boardwalk and into Ascari's aft cabin. I was home. In the space that was the designated settee area, I created a 5-foot by 7-foot flat space and turned it into my work table. Just forward of that, I parked my 120-pound industrial sewing machine, and the nav desk and pilot berth housed my 2 smaller sewing machines. I had a lot of work to do on Ascari to bring her back to life, and that required money. So I set her up to provide the space I needed to earn that money. I did my best, however, to keep her ready for sailing. I didn't want a floating sail loft. I wanted a sailboat. Fortunately, the aft cabin was the ideal place for setting up my workspace. There was lots of room. The galley was clear and operational, and the 2 forward cabins were my living space. 1 cabin to sleep in, 1 cabin to hang out and read, use the computer, or contemplate the resurrection of Ascari. There was a shower all the way forward, but I thought a better use for that space would be my walk-in closet. Yes, a walk-in closet, my nod to femininity. I took showers on deck like a civilized wooden boat sailor. The next big project was replacing all the rigging. Every chain plate, toggle, tang, and cable needed replacing. One of the chain plates I could fold in half with my hands. Several of the clevis pins disintegrated when I put a vice grip to them, and a toggle broke as I was waiting for the crane at St. Croix Marine to pull my mast. But with the advice and knowledge of several experienced friends, I replaced all my standing rigging. Replacing the bow chain plate was a scary proposition, but needed to be done. YouTube videos and stuff on the internet gave me the idea of the serious surgery involved. But I hired my friend Oliver to take on that job, and he did great. A friend with a drill press cut and drilled my chain plates in exchange for some boat canvas. A former Marine and all-around hero helped me with the stuff like getting old wire out of the staylock fittings. And there was a lot of hammering involved, and he put his strength into turning those seized bolts and other assorted impossible jobs. The rigger from Gold Coast Yachts tuned it for me, and soon Ascari was once more standing up proud and strong. Warren, my Marine friend, helped me sail her to St. Kitts, and there I hauled her out of the water and spent 5 months living alone in the boatyard, getting to know some of the systems, and sanding and painting and repairing lots of rotten wood. But little by little, day by day, I transformed her from the mess that she was into a beautiful, proud yellow trimaran. I painted her eyes on the bow so she could see where she was going. I hung flower leis on her bow rails. At Christmas time, I decorated her with tinsel leis and bells. One of the last big boatyard jobs was building a new rudder and replacing all the gudgeons and pinnels. I chose bright colors for her new canvas, and I created a bimini, dodger, sail cover, and various other needed canvas. I ordered her a new mainsail and a new Yankee. Then I sailed her back to St. Croix and hauled her again to put in a new shaft and shaft strut. My father came down to visit and see what I had gotten myself into. He spent days sitting on a park bench on the Christiansted boardwalk, sanding the teak and holly floorboards, helping me make my beautiful sailboat even more beautiful. Yes, he thought I was crazy, but he was proud of me. My dream for Ascari was to sail her, really sail her. Either spend a few years bouncing up and down the Caribbean, or take her to the South Pacific Islands and hang out there for a while. The Caribbean I felt I could do single-handed, but sailing to French Polynesia solo was not part of the plan. And no, I don't really like single-handing. I think life is much better when shared. There's a website called lovesail.com and I gave that a shot. I was hoping to find a lovable, experienced sailor to share my dreams. I put out a call into the realm of the internet, and through this online dating site, I met a man with a catamaran in the British Virgin Islands. His name was Rick. He liked my soft curves and sharp edges, and I liked his strength and determination. Rick and I sailed together to St. Kitts and St. Martin, where we labored in 2 more boatyards, but we found joy and happiness in each other's company. And in June of 2017, we set sail together for Panama aboard Ascari. We reached the San Blas Islands one stormy evening, too late to get safely past the reef. We sailed back and forth in a thunderstorm until daylight gave us the visibility we needed. Then we anchored in close to Isla Porvenir. We bounced around those pretty little islands for a few days, snorkeling and just hanging out. And then we headed to Portobello, where we had to go to finalize our yacht clearance. We anchored close up to the remains of an old Spanish fort, and we made friends and enjoyed the time there mostly, but it was a little inconvenient for things like groceries. And to get to a bank, one needs to take a 1.5-hour bus ride. It rained and rained and rained some more. The local sail loft, run by a local German couple, wanted to hire me and steal me away from my sailing, but I wasn't interested. We used their dinghy dock, and we had drinks and meals with them, and time and again they asked me to stay and work, but Portobello was not where I wanted to swallow my anchor. And it was a really wet town. It really rained a lot there. We finally broke free and headed towards Bocas del Toro, but the engine quit and we had a strong current against us. Unable to make headway, we turned around and sailed back to Portobello, feeling a bit like it was sucking us back. Some ports are very sticky. It's hard to leave them for one reason or another. Portobello was turning into that kind of port for us. I changed the raw water impeller and the engine ran, but I wasn't holding out much hope for its continued performance. Finally, we got a day with winds to sail, and we headed out towards Bocas del Toro again. It was only 250 miles away, but it took us 4 days to get there. And of course, the engine was not going to cooperate. We managed to sail into port, and we dropped our anchor near Bocas Yacht Club. Here we stayed for a while, sailing to the numerous bays and anchorages in this sheltered archipelago, while hurricane season blasted past the eastern Caribbean all summer long. Ascari was safe and happy, and I was safe and happy. Bocas del Toro is far from a perfect paradise. In truth, there's very little to be desired. But it was a good place to stop for a while, paint the decks, fix the engine, revamp my galley, and earn some money. Rick's boat was a Leopard catamaran. He had left it in charter service up in the British Virgin Islands while he sailed with me to Panama. His boat was roomy, modern, comfortable, really easy to sail. It had 4 double cabins, 2 bathrooms with hot showers, 2 engines in good conditions, large water and fuel capacity. She had an anchor windlass. She had 2 large tables and lots of places to sit comfortably. She had electronics appropriate for a modern sailboat, and she had an oven and a freezer. She had air conditioning. She had dinghy davits. Yes, his boat was very comfortable. In fun, I called it a pizza box. Yeah, pizza box. Comfort food, comfort boat. In contrast, Ascari had only one place for 2 people to comfortably sleep together, and that was on top of my work table in the aft cabin, the place that was designated to be the seating and eating area before I acquired her. My shower, used on deck or in the confines of the cockpit, is a pump-action 2-gallon plastic bottle designed for spraying weed killer. My engine was old and unreliable. Hipping the dinghy alongside the main hull and using the outboard engine for propulsion was a common means of motoring. She has a 40-gallon water tank and a 60-gallon fuel tank. There's no anchor windlass, so care must be taken in choosing an anchorage, as each anchor only has 40 foot of chain. The only table aboard Ascari is a teak folding TV tray, barely large enough for 2 plates. Ascari's cockpit is very comfortable for sitting, but down below, seating is a bit of a challenge. There's the single-person settee atop the engine compartment, and there's a bucket with a padded top, and there is the cooler, also used as a step to climb up over the sewing machine and into bed. That's where you sit. That's it. There's no oven. There's no freezer. There's no air conditioning. There's no dinghy davits. The electronics are basic. An autopilot we named Fred, a freaking remarkable electronic device. There is a GPS and there's an AIS. There's a VHF radio that really should be replaced, and that's it. But I felt Ascari was the better boat. She could sail better to windward, and the centerboard keeps her from setting too much. With the cutter rigged Hank-on sails, a more versatile sail set was possible. She's a wood boat, and she's simpler to repair. And she would never be mistaken for a charter boat. Her bow nets were perfect for stargazing and a quiet anchorage. Her center cockpit provided a safe and sheltered space to work the boat, and finally, she was my boat. The boat I put so much love and energy and time into, and really, she had everything I felt was needed for an ocean crossing. Now that we knew we wanted to stay together and sail together, the decision had to be made. Which of our two boats would we keep in the Caribbean, and which to sail to the South Pacific? Unfortunately, Hurricane Irma decided for us. It had mashed up Rick's boat, which was in Tortola, when Irma flattened the island. We flew back to the BVIs to rescue La Bella Vita, and we patched her up as best we could. We sailed her to Grenada, where we could get proper repairs done. But when the quotes and estimates for repairs were all in hand, and looking at a minimum of 6 months hard work in the boatyard, Rick decided to sell her as is and collect the insurance money. Ascari would be the boat we sailed to the South Pacific. We ordered a new diesel engine, and while that was being delivered to Panama, we took Ascari for a sail. We headed north towards Cuba, but we stopped at San Andres Island and spent Christmas there. The winds at that time of the year were not going to help us get to Cuba, so we changed direction and we sailed to Cartagena instead. The old city of Cartagena was a delight. Even the anchorage was vibrant and noisy. It was exploding with South American culture and charm. It was a very pleasant change from the numerous disappointments of Panama. We returned to Bocas del Toro, where our new Yanmar engine awaited us. Our mechanic was Jeff, an engine guru who could have been Danny DeVito's twin brother. Jeff had done his best for our old diesel. He managed to get it running and keep it running, but it was never going to be something that we could count on. He and Rick pulled out the old rusty thing and installed our new and shiny 3-cylinder Yanmar in its place. That engine is Rick's baby, and since it was installed, I rarely take the helm anymore for docking or anchoring. Next, we sailed her to Shelter Bay Marina across from Cologne, where I was accosted by horror stories of bad canal transits. No one ever talks about the uneventful passages, but they do seem to go on and on about the boat that got sideways in the lock, the boat that hit the door and mashed in its transom, the screw-ups on behalf of line handlers or advisors. And to top it all off, there was the catamaran that made it through to the other side, but was damaged in transit, and came all the way back through the canal to haul out at Shelter Bay Boatyard, have the hulls repaired as well as one of the engines, and then they plan to take her back through the canal again. That's 3 transits to get to the other side. Needless to say, I was stressed out and losing sleep, thinking maybe Ascari wouldn't mind sailing the Caribbean a bit more. But Rick would not have any of that stinking thinking. He was determined to get Ascari to the Pacific Ocean and sail her to French Polynesia. Rick, in his previous life, was an airline pilot. Calm, cool, attention to the job at hand. If anyone could get my boat safely through the Panama Canal, with its rough concrete walls and enormous steel doors and giant ships and giant propellers just meters away from my little wooden boat, it was Rick. So Rick took the helm through our canal transit, while I moved fenders around and handled the lines. We hired 3 professional line handlers who assisted in the transit, and they were great. We were tied to the wall in all 6 locks, and thankfully no one was hurt and nothing was damaged. Ascari was in the Pacific Ocean. After provisioning and filling with water and fuel at Vistamar Marina, we set sail for the Marquesas Islands. The first few days were rough with contrary winds and weather. We used the engine a lot those first few days. It seemed like all we did was beat to windward at first, waves washing over the decks and knocking things about. But gradually the wind shifted in our favor and we were reaching on a port tack. Finally the sun came out and the winds got more southeast and we were able to broad reach using the Genoa. Some of the wonderful things we saw on our passage were bioluminescent dolphins swimming between the hulls. The squid would land on our deck at night, and in the morning we would gather them, clean them, and feast on their tender flesh. A leatherback turtle swam by to say hello. A booby perched on the bow rail and hung out half the morning. A whale of indeterminate size spouted off to leeward. And most beautiful of all, the swish and sway of Ascari as she danced over the waves, her colorful Genoa filled with the Pacific trades, pulling us closer and closer to our destination. The equator crossing was great fun, and with a little hazing and lots of giggles, Rick became a shellback. Ascari brought us safely to Nukuhiva with only minor equipment failures, and it was a delightfully uneventful passage. My Sea Runner Trimaran has proven herself to me and my crew to be a very stable and strong sailboat. We look forward to lots of South Pacific passages and lovely island stops as we continue following our dreams. If you see my little yellow trimaran anchored in a quiet bay with her sails furled, be sure to stop by and say hi. We'll put a pot on for you.